All right, so well, some good news and some bad news, I guess. No, it's always good news first. So the good news first is that, we don't need to pretend that we are like different people. So we match the descriptions, right? Karl is Karl and not someone else. And I'm kind of assuming that Shuyao, yeah, is that how you pronounce your...
I think so, yeah.
No, you should tell me how you pronounce your name.
You can call me Brother Bing. It's easier.
Is it? Okay. Yeah. Bing. Yeah. All right. I can call you Bing then.
Or you can call me Bing Bing. It's even better.
Bing Bing. Can be a Bing Bing. I will start shamelessly by kind of like introducing myself and my weird role in this community. So I'm like a resident skeptic here. Right? I don't believe any claims, and I usually find that I'm confused by how people are using tenses in the English language. Like they say, my rollup is this, or my system is that. However, what I typically find is that they're talking about the future, but they kind of forget to tell you that this is not what they are, right? And we have a personal vendetta against multisigs, so. If your rollup bridge whatever is a multisig, then you're not our friends, and we all hope that we're gonna grow up. But but we have to stop like behaving like children all the time, right? This is not a game. So
you're really gonna hate my centralized sequencer.
Of course, I love centralized sequencers as long as I don't have to trust them, right? So we're gonna like touch upon this point. I think it's a very interesting one. So I'm a founder of L2Beat. We are a community-run watchdog. We do the God's work for the community, and we want these guys to be like we want them to be honest, right? No more game, no marketing. Let's just try to play it differently. And so maybe like super short introduction. I mean, we know you because you've been on the panel, the previous one, but I'm sure that being, we will appreciate the introduction being from you for the audience and for myself as well, because, we haven't had a chance to talk yet.
Actually, we talked before.
I'm sorry.
Oh, no! Just mocked.
Right.
Right. One of the many crypto Chinese women out there. No, it's okay. So we've met before. I used to work at Consensus. I see my old boss there as well. We worked on Linear back in the day, so we interacted when I was working on Linear go-to-market. But my name is Shuyao, so it's very difficult to pronounce. But if you're interested, it's pronounced like the shoes you're wearing, and Yao. So Shuyao, very easy. But I go by Brother Bing on Twitter because I've discovered that there are a lot of guys who are psyopsing as girls on Twitter, and I wanted to do the opposite. So I was psyopsing as a dude for the longest time, and then people just forgot my real name. Then I just go by Bing. I'm also the co-founder of MegaETH. We are the first real-time blockchain, which I can explain where the real-timeness comes from. I'm also the least technical person on this panel. I already told them, please don't ask me technical questions.
I will be only asking technical questions. We're gonna have
Great.
fun.
And I will answer with one sentence. Ticker is ETH.
That's gonna be an interesting panel.
But do you know that for the last 1 week, the Ethereum market cap has increased by $90 billion? That's the entire FDV of Solana. So I think we've done pretty well. So the ticker is ETH.
All right, we're gonna help you make your case, right?
Okay, great.
Karl, now you can properly introduce yourself and not pretend that you're someone else.
Oh God, I mean, I guess I'm resident optimist, but I'm also very skeptical when it comes to security. I share that, and in fact, that's why we posted about multi-sigs and that this is a race to stage 2. We talk about stage 2 all the time. That is when our fault proofs really, or ZK proofs really matter. So yeah, I'm excited.
The security is actually hard, and I think it's so much easier to talk about other properties of blockchain, right? But security is like super misunderstood, and like I say, I mean, we're going to touch on that. But just out of curiosity, because we've had this very interesting panel before. You talk about like unified Ethereum. We're going to talk about scaling in a moment. Who in the audience have used Across before? All right, and now please keep your hand, the ones that used, if you think you understand the trust assumptions of Across. Well, it seems like almost, well, no one's really sure. Most hands went down, right? So this is, I guess, good and bad. I'm not really sure, but that probably just shows that security is hard, and we're gonna touch upon trust assumptions.
Yeah, I think trust is important, but I think most people use Across would be like me, right? You have a bridge aggregator and it shows you what's the most capital efficient way, and Across often came up as top.
Yeah, fine, but can you lose your funds, by depositing and using Across?
I know heart.
Right, but we were not to talk about that. We are here to discuss scaling, and when I learned about this panel, I kind of thought that we're going to debate a little bit. Here Karl wants to scale wide, and I'm assuming Bing wants to scale like high, right? And then I heard Justin Drake in the morning. He said Ethereum is going to scale both horizontally and vertically at the same time. And I thought, damn, this panel is like no more, right? What are we even gonna talk about? And then I realized that he's talking about something like 5-10 years maybe into the future. And I'm here really to try to get these guys to talk about like where we are now without confusing tenses, please. Like when you say we are, that means right now, okay? That's a game. And when you say we want to be, that's in the future, right? Okay, so my first question to Karl would be, what is Superchain today?
Nice, good question. Okay, so Superchain today, it is a bunch of different chains, various different bridges, and a standard blockspace charter, which is a kind of social governance, kind of unification, the first stage towards actual, bridge unification that we're working towards. So that is what the Superchain is today, kind of a bunch of still decently fragmented chains, and that's why I'm talking about defragmenting Ethereum in, a couple days.
And I'm kind of assuming that tomorrow it's going to solve all of our problems, right?
Oh,
but
yeah.
That's like kind of obvious. All right, so what's the MegaETH today?
MegaETH does not exist today. So, yay. It actually does. So we actually
but maybe something exists. Okay, so let's like focus on like what is really being done, because I kind of like looked at the GitHub. I couldn't probably find it, but I was really not searching maybe well enough. So like what work has been done so far to make you be so kind of like bullish, on building this, super high performant, weird type of thing that probably very few in the audience understand.
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, the code is deep in the rabbit hole, but the idea of MegaETH is actually quite simple and elegant. In fact, Vitalik wrote about our architecture back in 2021 in a paper called Endgame, right? So in the paper, he said the endgame of scalable blockchain is where you have relatively centralized block production and very decentralized block validating network. And that's exactly what we're building. So the insights that the MegaETH co-founders, my technical co-founders, discovered was the bottleneck for scaling is really on the sequencer, right? So we have someone like the Optimism team working on the consensus, which we're actually using the OP node. So thank you for the work. We believe in world computer, and we actually organize an event with Sync as well, because we believe a world with zero knowledge proof. But our specialty is really improve the sequencer. So what did we do, right? So what's working in the process right now is 90% of the performance bottleneck is Merkle-Patricia trie. So we completely scratched that, and we rewrote the entire state trie. And that's where the performance really came from. And because we opt in to have a centralized sequencer, you can have max really efficient and powerful block production engine. And to compensate on the centralized block production, we have really decentralized block validating network. So light, you can actually run it on your mobile phone. And then as a whole, as a heterogeneous network, we believe in we're performance maxi. We're actually using eigenlayer. I see Robert there. We're using eigenDA for high throughput. So what MegaETH, we're envisioning and we're coding toward is an extremely performant blockchain that leverages what has been done already in Ethereum. And our contribution is really the sequencer level. We haven't open sourced it, so you haven't seen it, but we're hoping to launch very soon.
Soon, meaning?
I need to ask a dev.
Never do that.
Yeah. Don't trust.
Wait, what?
I mean, don't trust. Depends on the dev. Some devs you're like, wow, that's 15 years from now, and then some devs you're like, holy shit, you're gonna do it tomorrow. And that's me, by the way. I'm that dev, which is unfortunate. I have learned over time.
All right, so let's try maybe to define a little bit. Like what do we even mean by horizontal scaling? So from the user's perspective. Being like from the outside of what's happening inside. For me, I'm gonna make a simple case for horizontal scaling, right? If someone pays for coffee in Australia right now, that probably shouldn't really affect me, buying some good Thai food in Bangkok, right? So I'm kind of imagining that, the only time that their transactions will like clash with my transactions is if we somehow traded with each other, but otherwise that could be all processed in parallel in a way, right? And in the traditional finance is essentially scaled horizontally. We have thousands or tens of thousands of banks that help people to like transact in parallel to each other, and we have various levels of settlement. Which probably vary depending on how big is the transaction, right? For small payments, they settle very quickly based on some weird pre-confirmations. For the very big transactions, you wait 3 days or whatever. But that's how traditional systems work, and that's how traditional systems scales. No one in their safe mind would have like a world computer that have all the transactions in the world. Would that be like the fair, characterization of the horizontal scaling?
Yeah, I think that's super fair. And okay, I want to just say something which is going to be deeply upsetting to most people, and I apologize in advance.
That's why we have this panel, and that's why it's different.
This panel is not kumbaya, so you don't have to apologize.
No, it's just too confusing to actually communicate, and so I'm not going to do a good job. But it's just the fact that all solutions are fundamentally based on horizontal scalability. You cannot get around horizontal scalability or parallelism because, unfortunately, there is just a limit to the amount of information processed per unit space. And so, like, physics says, vertical scaling to, only vertical scaling doesn't work. Now, there is something.
Have you said that to Solana people? Or?
No. So here's the tricky thing. This is why I was so depressed when I was like, oh God, I'm going to try to explain something that's impossible to explain. So there is a difference. There's a fundamental, very big difference in blockchain architectures between vertical or like monolithic APIs that you expose developers versus asynchronous APIs that you expose to developers. So you have a choice. You can say, okay, I'm going to choose Solana, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, developers, you can think about this as a single unified monolithic system, but then what you can do is you can, in your transactions, supply the state that you touch, and then when it's actually sent to the network, oh, well, that's when we horizontally scale it, and we run the computations in parallel. So this is really a kind of back and forth teeter-tottering around like, what do we show to developers, not what we build in the underlying architecture. And so we end up with a decision point, which is fundamentally just, do you want to add the horrible, and I agree, it is horrible complexity of asynchronous programming to the programming model for the EVM? Or do we want to kind of like hide it away and then allow developers to build kind of asynchrony into their systems, but on top of an otherwise seemingly synchronous programming environment? So that was my attempt to explain the unexplainable, but I do hope this is about unifying Ethereum. This is bridge building. We're doing the same thing, just different APIs. Yeah. Oh, God. I keep getting confused.
All right, so I'm gonna now make a case for vertical scaling, the way I could understand that. These guys are making like integration hell. It's gonna take years, to solve interoperability. They will create standards upon standards upon standards. Once they figure it out how to do it within, let's say, superchain, they will then take years to talk to, I don't know, other clusters, right? And we don't even have an Arbitrum Fox, in the room, and then ZK. It's gonna be fun, but very complex, and trust assumptions, understanding them, that's gonna be a challenge. While you guys, so you seem to like circumvent the problem, right? And you want to process all the transactions, in the super high pace, and you will leverage some magic, which we'll be talking about in a moment, to actually prove to us that you're not cheating. Is that how vertical scaling, should work? I mean, tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think there are two questions, right? I think the first one was I think it's a response to the developer experiences, and the second one is exactly what we're trying to do to make you trust us. And I think part of that answer is actually we rely on Karl to to give us the trust, because we're using OP as our consensus mechanism. But from our perspective, right, we saw all the horizontal scaling. Like when I was at Consensus, I worked with all the layer 2s. I worked with you guys, I worked with ZK Sync. I think Elastic Chain is also having some sort of standard. So my view has always been that it's extremely confusing, and I'm not sure if it's good for Ethereum. And I think we've kind of seen that, right, from the rise of Solana. It's extremely simple, and it's really good for Ethereum to see the rise of Solana. I tend to think, and I think some of our investors tend to think that MegaETH is a real Solana. So what do we mean when we talk about vertical scaling, right? Vertical scaling, you're freaking max out the hardware. Solana cannot max out the hardware the way MegaETH does. And only when MegaETH does it because we're using Ethereum as a settlement layer. Shout out to Settlement Day. We derive security, right, from Ethereum. So we take vertical scaling to the extreme. But even more, we take this trade-off to the extreme. Rather than having decentralized sequencer, we have one centralized sequencer. So Solana can never be as scalable as MegaETH. Like even the network extension on Solana will not be as performant as MegaETH. Right? So no chain will be as performant as MegaETH. And the hope is we are going to have applications that will be very easy for application builder to write single API rather than like, okay, I need to plug into a solver networks. I'm sorry, Hart, please don't hate me. I think it's just very confusing. So exactly how we do it, right? People often say, oh, you guys have like 6-digit TPS. I'm like, TPS is kind of like, such a meme. It's a pastime KPI. The secret sauce of MegaETH is really latency, right? So we have 10 millisecond latency. We already achieved that internally on our DevNet, so that's a already statement. And we're going toward 1 millisecond. But in comparison, right, Solana has 400 milliseconds. We are literally attracting builders on Solana to MegaETH right now, because whatever they want to build cannot be built on Solana. Right, that's what we call only possible on MegaETH. It's only possible on Ethereum. And similarly, I think other layer 2s are making headway in latency as well. Because the more you talk to developers, the more you realize that it's not just about TPS, it's about latency to unlock newer experiences. But in terms of security, yeah, we rely on Karl. So, I mean, you are my answer.
I wouldn't rely on Karl, in terms of security.
What? Unbelievable.
How many multisigs you run?
Yes, but we're telling people that we are in a state of non-decentralization and being very honest and have a multiple proof system and multiple clients.
In the works.
And it works. And
in
really,
the works.
Huh?
In the works, right?
In the works, but I mean, pretty. Like you can verify all these various blocks and Kona and all this stuff. And obviously, we're not stage 2, and it's gonna be a long road for us to get to stage 2. But we talk about it anyway. Sorry, I'm just saying we can jam. Don't worry.
It's okay. If you fail,
right?
I'm going to find someone else.
Very confident.
There's a lot of options there, yeah. I mean, there's only one MegaETH, but there are a lot of other consensus.
All right, so let's have this, like a mental model. Here are the guys, who's gonna have this giant sequencer, super centralized. However, it's settling to Ethereum, so trust us, it's gonna be fine. And here are the guys with thousands of chains being part of a super chain, including Chihuahua chain, including the chain that I will launch, just to screw them. I'm going to make sure that, we're going to poke for holes, right? So let's think a little bit about, two of the most fundamental properties that I think we care about. Let's start with censorship resistance, right? How do you guys, with a centralized sequencer, think about censorship resistance for, let's say, folks from, I don't know, Kurdistan or whatever, like some people that the state nation suddenly decide, we don't like these guys, and, they have to be, for whatever reason, unknown probably to them, included in some kind of a sanction list or whatever, and suddenly, if you were unlucky to be born in this country, you're out. No, but it's worse because you were in before, and now you're like stuck, right? And you cannot get out because you're censored. So with censorship resisting, well, how do you want to really solve that? Having a so super fast centralized sequencer.
Yeah, so I think the first answer is, similar to what other layer 2s have done, right? We have escape hash.
Which is
so you can always exit to layer 1, but we are also innovating on a new design, which is a rotational sequencer. So we are not a fan of decentralizing sequencer because the moment you are decentralizing sequencer, you are reintroduce consensus. At that point, I don't know if you're a layer 2 or layer 1. You might as well just be a layer 1.
But then you will have to buy 2 supercomputers.
You have to,
not just one.
But when you can do the same with rotational sequencer. But the goal with rotational sequencer is at any moment, you have one sequencer that's running to ensure performance. But you are not dividing your transaction into multiple sequencer, right? Because we're performance maxi at the end of the day. We're going to kill Solana. Like, we can't afford to have centralized sequencer. But to give more censorship resistant, we're going to have multiple rotational sequencer. So folks who are censoring one sequencer can still get transaction done in another sequencer. So it's very early on. So that's why we don't talk quite a lot about it because I think we're the only one who's thinking about in that direction. So I have nothing to promise. So I'm kind of scared talking about it. I'll shut up.
How would it work for superchain and horizontal scaled chains? If I'm censored by base because they don't like my political views, will I be able to jump to OP mainnet with my stuff?
Well, of course, we have the escape hatch and the force inclusion transactions. Great, that is fantastic. And then I think that in a way a similar response there, which is we are trying to build out decentralized sequencing infrastructure. We're a little bit on the maximized choice for chains, chain governor is kind of part of the spectrum. And so I would actually, one thing I would say is that the superchain already has decentralized sequencing because there's a bunch of these different chains that are at least, tangibly in some ways part of the superchain, and they're different sequencers. So we have already got some little bit of sequencer sharding, but I think there's way more that we can do there, whether that be the stuff that Uniswap is doing with TEEs, or whether that be, and their whole validator network and stuff like that, whether that be some rotational sequencing stuff. And I'm hopeful that as we build out all of these different, code bases, that they're open source, we can share notes and use different sequencers that are, that preserve decentralization and our transaction ordering properties.
All right, and the second question, because we're almost running out of time, and for the record, L2Beat does not trust Intel. Just
Okay, but do you trust Intel for $100,000 or less, or $20,000 or less?
Well, kind of depends which passport do I use. I'm lucky to have 2.
Yeah, exactly. You can't have lock-in. Yeah. Okay, anyway.
Second question: how do I verify trustlessly that your sequencer is not cheating? I'm reading in a white paper that you hope for the ZK provers to actually give me the service, but how they are supposed to keep up with your chain if you're throwing the avalanche of transactions at them, and they oh, Jesus. How do you want them to keep up with proving them?
We have a validating network. So
no, I'm not talking about validators, I'm talking about provers, because to validate, validating is cheap, right? I can validate ZK. How do you prove the computation? What's the vision, for the MegaETH to create a prover network to sort of let me, independently validate, the integrity of computation?
I have no answer for that.
Well, I'll answer. I mean,
You answer, yeah. Karl, go.
I think y'all can 100% keep up. I think, we need to make a lot of progress in our ZK proofs. And we also really on the security side of the ZK proofs, like it is very, that is going to take a lot of work, just like fault proofs. It's really, really hard. And
But
we
it
need
will
multiple
happen.
proofs.
It will happen.
Oh, yeah, I mean, it will happen.
Yes.
No sleep till stage 2. We need to get to decentralization. We need actual proving systems that, by the way, individually do not work. Oh, by the way, Bartek, one thing I want to say is we should not, if you have one proof system and you claim that your proof system is bug-free and you YOLO to stage 2, I'm very scared of that. So please help us. But anyway, point being is that with, ZKPs, you just parallelize the massive computation. Yes, it's going to be incredibly expensive, but it's totally doable as long, if you do it securely, then you can use multiple ZKPs. So I don't know. I don't see any issue with it.
I think the trade-off we were making right since day one was we are performance maxi means like freaking like fast, cheap transaction, right? And ZK adds cost and time. So, but that's the trade-off we're making, and we're owning the trade-off. And there are so many ZK VM that we can choose from. I feel like I'm the perfect BD target for all the ZK VM. So I'm still open to chat with anyone here. So I'm just thinking that the Ethereum people are so smart that one day some of you all will figure out how to do this thing cheap and fast. Like my sequencer is there ready for you to add proof.
Okay, so last question really, because we're running out of time, but I wanted to sort of like have this figure closed somehow. Karl, with Superchain, I hope that I won't be having to run the full nodes of every single node in the Superchain, because that's probably not scaling. And again, I mean, that means that we have to wait for ZK for that, to be real, or what?
Okay, so we have a number of options for the proof system. So, okay, first off, I think a mental model that's super important is that every single bridge to an L2 is itself a light client proof of that particular L2. So we, by syncing Ethereum, are already getting a light client proof of a semi-recent state root of every single L2 on Ethereum, which, by the way, is incredibly cool and already proves out that we can build out these secure light clients. Well, it doesn't quite prove it out because there's still a lot of multi-sigs backing them. But in theory, we should be able to do it. So how do we get to a point where we have, we don't need to run a, proof of every single chain or run a full node of every single chain? Well, in the multi-proof spirit, the way that I would answer you is I would say we add a ZK proof. In fact, we add a second ZK proof. In fact, and by the way, OP succinct, we have like beginnings of ZK proofs, risk zero. We also have beginnings of ZK proofs for specifically, OP chains. And also a fault proof. Fault proofs get a lot of hate, but guess what?
Oh, not from me.
Okay, well, yeah, fair. That is true. Not for, shout out to L2Beat for that. But fault proofs, actually, if we, there's more centralized versions of this where you have a bunch of people who are like running big nodes, and you can do off-chain fault proofs and compare the responses between different RPC providers. And in fact, I think that that's going to be a really good thing because we rely on Infura and Alchemy and all these things. We already have these kind of super node networks that we rely on. So like, let's make them fault provable. Let's like ask Alchemy and Infura the same question and see if they give me the same answer. So that's like that's already kind of getting into the off-chain fault proof zone. I think we can actually lean into that, and we can even do fun things like having a network of nodes that is randomly sampled, and in fact that scales linearly in the number of nodes. Anyway, point being that fault proofs are pretty great. ZK proofs are also pretty great. TEs, Bartek, are also pretty great. Come on,
Maybe
there's a place for everyone. Defense in depth, friends. Defense in depth. Anyway, so we're gonna have all the proofs. We're gonna have a lot of different light clients for you to choose
he's kicking
from.
out. He's
Oh,
really
no.
kicking us out
I'm
of
so
the
sorry.
stage. Thank you so much, guys. It was entertaining. I hope that we've all learned something a little bit here.
I also think shout out to L2Beat. I think like without you guys, none of us could have made this. Yeah.
Thank you.
Really, Bartek.